before I get into the meat and potatoes of this segment, I just want to say that I like peace. I dislike war. I dislike people pointlessly dying in wars that they don't really gain to benefit from on either side. People dying is bad. As such, I'm not taking any one particular side in this. I'm trying to analyze the facts as I see it. And what I've seen over the past day or two is people sharing about this claim, which is that Russia is seeking to import 1 million Indian workers in 2025 to replace labour lost to the Ukrainian war, which seems to reflect a lot of the demographic problems that we're facing in the rest of the West. Russia's interesting because it's basically the gateway to Asia, the large gateway to Asia where a lot of the...
Sounds like a great name for an Asian restaurant or a buffet.
Well,
gateway to Asia.
You're not working here anymore, so you can set up your investment and get that going.
Could be the one Asian takeaway in England after the deportation.
Josh's little red takeaway.
But it reflects the demographic problems that we have over here, and Russia is a largely population-wise European country. A lot of the population is clustered in the West, but also there are vast swaths of land which are over in Asia.
It's already quite a multi-ethnic country.
It's basically an empire. It's an enormous multi-ethnic empire. I think there's something like 192 ethnicities within Russia already, and I've seen that they do have some problems in places like St. Petersburg and elsewhere where you're getting because it's big federated states, interstate migration coming over to the West to take jobs that are in places like St. Petersburg. But this in particular seemed to be reflective of the problems that we're facing. So I thought, okay, what's the actual truth to this? Because we're in the middle of a war, and the people on the right who want you to believe that you should be rooting for Russia try and say that Russia is a bastion of traditional values, family values. It's the one last place, along with maybe a few Baltic states and Poland, where you've got truly European values shining through. And oftentimes other people on the right who don't want you to be supporting Russia. I don't think you have to take either of those positions, by the way. You can stay neutral.
You can think for yourself. That is an option.
But other people want you to think that Russia is this enormous brown country filled with Muslims, which is just as anti-white as the rest of us. And this news seemed to be supporting the idea that Russia is this big brown anti-white horde being led by Putin, who wants to screw over his population as much as our leaders want to screw over ours by importing foreigners into lower wages, change culture, etc., etc. So I thought I would look into this subject and try and see the truth of it. And before I actually go into what I was finding, first some context, some recent updates on what's been going on in the Russia and Ukrainian war. So there was talk earlier this year of Trump reducing the amount of weapons that would be sent over to Ukraine, especially after his big bust up with Zelensky in the White House a few months ago. But now they've said that they will be receiving some more weapons. He said that they'll send more weapons after an announcement last week that Washington would halt some shipments of critical arms to Kiev during a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that was the same one where Netanyahu offered Trump the Nobel Peace Prize,
yes, and
nominated him for it.
Netanyahu the greatest man in the world.
Yeah, the greatest man in the world. Like, big back-patting operation going on in that meeting.
Patting so loud it could be heard all the way in Ukraine, apparently.
Yeah. Trump said he was not happy with Putin and that Ukraine was getting hit very hard. Trump also indicated that the US would send primarily defensive weapons to help Ukraine's war effort. There is probably a reason for Ukraine having defensive weapons sent to them rather than offensive weapons, which is, I was listening to a stream that was done last night on Scrump's channel, which is that NATO is beginning to run out of missiles. This is the same kind of thing that we saw in Israel during the Israel-Iran conflict that happened just a few weeks ago, where Iran produces really cheap munitions. A lot of Russia's missiles that they're getting are from Iran, because Iran has a big manufacturing base where they can produce all of them cheap and they're effective. Israel has very, very, very expensive interception defenses where they're basically intercepting really cheap missiles that can be produced indefinitely with really, really, really expensive equipment that can't be produced indefinitely, which is probably one of the reasons they slammed the brakes on it after America intervened. Europe and America don't really have great manufacturing bases for the weapons anymore, or at least certainly Europe doesn't.
No, definitely not.
And especially with America pulling out, slowly but surely, that's going to become more and more of a problem. What I heard was that basically most European domestic manufacturing of weapons is being produced by one factory in Poland.
Which is not very good in terms of defence, because one target is a very easy target.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also worth mentioning as well that by supplying defensive weapons, it de-escalates some of the increasing tension that we had from Ukraine actually striking into Russia proper rather than disputed territory.
Which was using American weapons, which oftentimes necessitated American operatives on the ground to help to oversee the usage of these weapons, which could have been seen by Russia. Doesn't seem that they did at the time, but could have been seen by Russia as direct provocation, direct involvement in the war. So that could have escalated things. Things didn't escalate, and for a long while we've just had what appeared to be a stalemate going on, but I've seen that Russia has been increasingly pushing into Ukrainian territory, and they are looking to make some moves on other Ukrainian cities in Ukraine's east. So Trump has decided he's going to do that. Trump's apparent change of heart came days after a deadly Russian drone and missile barrages on Ukrainian cities, including Kiev. One attack on the city last Thursday claimed a third life, according to local officials, so that's 3 presumably civilians killed in these attacks. The Pentagon responded as well, saying that at President Trump's direction, the Department of Defense is sending additional defensive weapons to Ukraine to ensure the Ukrainians can defend themselves while we work to secure a lasting peace and ensure the killing stops. I looked into it. I can't see many updates on what's going on with peace talks at the moment. So it seems that the conflict will carry on and continue to carry on indefinitely, which means, day one peace didn't work out very well, and it means the killing will continue.
I mean, not even year one peace.
Year one peace would have been the end of 2022, so that was well behind us. We'll see if Trump's year one can end with peace.
That's what I meant.
I can only hope so. Because while we are in the middle of the war, it's difficult to be able to determine exact casualties when we're in the middle of a war. And casualties, I'm including injuries and deaths. But estimates are going up to potentially 1 million for Russians at the moment. And The Guardian are claiming here in their sources that that's based off of things like funeral business in Russia, and also some places like, let me see here, an independent Russian outlet, Mediazona, has identified the names of more than 111,000 Russian military personnel killed using official records, social media obituaries, and images of tombstones. Estimates coming from the Ministry of Defense and other places are saying that it could be anywhere between 250,000 to 950,000 Russian military deaths. That's also being said by a study by the US-based Center for Strategic and International Studies. In Ukraine, their casualties are potentially 60 to 100,000 personnel killed and total casualties of approximately 400,000. So these are catastrophic numbers. If Russia's numbers are anything like 950,000, that's more than we lost during, I believe, the First World War. I think we lost 750,000.
It is, of course, difficult to establish whether someone's been killed, captured, or is missing in action as well. So there's a certain degree of uncertainty with a lot of the figures that are coming out. But it is certainly safe to believe that an entire generation of young men on both sides has been lost.
Yes, and women as well, because of the way that Ukraine especially is scripting women into it. And they go on to mention here, what will broaden out into the rest of the subject, that Russia has a demographic crisis going on outside of this as well. Even before the conflict, sucking up the lives of so many young men, Russia was experiencing a demographic crisis very similar to the demographic crises that we are experiencing in the rest of Europe and in the US and many liberalized and westernized countries where birth rates are low. Of ethnic Russians, I think the birth rate is 1.4 or 1.5, well below replacement rates. And the other ethnic groups in Russia, it is mainly the more Islamized, like the people who are in the North Caucasus, the Chechens.
I think Russia's an interesting case as well, because
above replacement rate.
Russia's an interesting case as well because Lots of people point to the cost of living as one of the reasons, as well as deliberate programming, but I don't think that's going on as much in Russia. And I think actually, because of the sanctions and because they produce a lot of their things internally from the old Soviet times, the cost of goods isn't, extortionate relative to, say, the West. It's comparable as a percentage of their purchasing. And so what it seems to me to mean isn't that it's a deliberate political thing, because it doesn't seem like there's that messaging, and it doesn't seem to be purely economic. I believe it's some sort of human thing whereby you get to a certain level of development and people simply stop having children.
Yes, it seems that once you reach a certain living standard for people, once certain amenities and comforts are met, day to day, you're not in a constant struggle for survival. People stop having as many children. And Russia's also had a lot of problems because there's holdovers culturally from the Soviet eras where people were having ridiculous amounts of abortion. For instance, abortions to the point where...
the highest rates in Europe,
I believe per capita it was 7 per woman, I should say.
7 per woman?
And that will, of course, be massively spiked up by particular women having lots and lots and lots of abortions. But I think it was something like low access to contraceptives meant that women were just using abortions as a form of contraceptive to a ridiculous degree, which led to some women experiencing infertility as a result of it. Now, it seems that women aren't necessarily having as many abortions. They've drastically reduced those numbers, but access to contraceptives has increased. And also what I was reading is that Russian men are facing a bit of a fertility crisis as well because of alcoholism and other such things. It's rendering a lot of them
Sounds
infertile.
very stereotypical, doesn't it?
It is a very stereotypical reason, but that's some of the stuff that I've been looking into here. And as well as that, you have people emigrating out of the country, people having to move to the front lines, killing off lots of people that way. The average male life expectancy in Russia has fallen from 68 to 66 since the start of the special military operation. And he said, and a demographer, Alexander Araksha, has said that the government has made it harder to track long-term demographic consequences of the ongoing fighting. They stopped publishing all mortality and life expectancy data for its male population from 2024 onwards. And again, if you look into this, there's the ethnic groups here, but if you just scroll up, it leads to a population pyramid that will look quite familiar to anybody in the West, where you have aging populations, a lot more people in their middle age and older than you get in the peak working ages around here. I can tell why this contraction is so sharp here, which is going to be people losing their lives or moving out of the country. But in terms of the ethnic groups, they say in here that Russia is about 70% ethnic Russian. Where is the ethnic groups gone here? Immigration. Oh, God. It's vanished. Here we are. We're back here. So it's about 71% in 2021 identified as ethnic Russians, 19% of the total population identified with various ethnic minority groups. I think the rest of it is made up of either indeterminate or people who are of Germanic rather than Russian backgrounds. According to the United Nations, Russia's immigration population is the third largest in the world, numbering over 11.6 million in 2016, most of which are from post-Soviet states, mainly from Central Asia. And there are 22 republics in Russia, and of those, 12 of them, ethnic Russians constitute a minority. So already a vast, diverse, ethnically enriched nation, which means that surely we should have just been steamrolled over by them immediately. Ukraine, very homogenous. Russia, diverse, varied, strong, right? They should have just steamrolled over the country. So I guess that doesn't make much sense. But at the same time, you get accounts like, say, for instance, Radio Genoa posting about, oh, this is Moscow. What do you notice? And it's just
slop.
Videos of lots and lots of white people, which seems to be pretty fair, given that 70% at least of the population, especially, again, if you look at some of the maps that they provide here. So this map, for instance, this is the percentage of people who are ethnically Russian in Russia. Red is, 80+%.
Yes.
So you get massive swaths of the West, which are 80+% ethnic
European
Russian.
Russia, basically.
Yeah. European Russian, whereas you get huge swaths of the land which are mostly wasteland, let's be fair, where it's not. So their demographic situation seems slightly better than what we have over here, but the demographics are still dropping in terms of the total proportion of European Russians seems to be dropping because of reduced birth rates, because of aging populations, people not having children, people migrating out of the country. But then you get the slop from one side saying, like, look at how white it is, and then you get other people saying, well, actually, here's also what Russia looks like, because they have
the largest percentage of Muslims as a percentage of their population of any European country.
Oh, yes. And you have demonstrations, hundreds of thousands performing Eid prayers in the streets of Moscow. This is supported, of course, as well by Putin, because he is emperor of a vast multi-ethnic empire where a lot of them are already Muslim. I've seen some reports that by the end of maybe 2050, 30% of the population of Russia is predicted to be Muslim. So that's all very interesting. So again, there's evidence on both sides for both kinds of the arguments of Russia. But either way, we know that people are dying, young men are dying, there are labour shortages, there is a record low unemployment at the moment in Russia of 2.4%. And when you have labour shortages and not very many people in work, who are out of work, the government only ever tends to go the solution only ever tends to go one way for stuff like that, especially when Russia is already allied with nations like India with the BRICS agreements. Okay,
sort of a military alliance, an economic one, but I think India is somewhat friendly with Russia, aren't they? As far as I'm aware.
They have strong ties to one another that they want to make stronger. And when you say it's not militarily, maybe not yet, to be fair, maybe not ever, because Russia has
Indians were scammed into fighting for Russia?
Actively been scamming some Indians into signing up to join the fight in
has
Russia.
Turned.
This is very strange. It was, to be fair, in this article, only 91 Indians. But that's still more Indians than you would expect to get scammed into fighting on Russia's behalf for them, right?
They just posed as beautiful Russian women on Facebook, and they were trapped by unsolicited messages.
Yeah. So most of them are from poor families who were lured by agents with the promise of money and jobs, sometimes as helpers in the Russian army. Instead, they were sent straight to the war zone.
They're not going to be put on latrine duty, to be fair, are they?
Many of them said they were stationed in parts of Ukraine under Russian control, where they had to navigate landmines, drones, missiles, and sniper attacks with little to no military training. Thankfully, Russia has now said that they're not going to do this anymore. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. They're just going to bring in North Koreans to fight for them instead, I would imagine, because they've got strong ties with those.
Both government wins then. The North Korean government doesn't have to feed them, and the Russians get troops.
Yeah. There you go.
I bet that's probably the nicest time those North Koreans have ever had. They actually get military rations.
It would be kind of funny if Russia did this big migration agreement with India and then just pulled all of their own soldiers out and sent them all to the front line. That would be a hell of a bait and switch. But I wouldn't be supportive of it, because I don't want loads of Asians overrunning European countries in any capacity.
No.
Surprise, surprise, I know, right?
A golden horde this time.
And so what's been going on as well? So they've done that. In India and Russia, they have been already discussing, so to go back to the original claim of 1 million immigrants coming in from India because of these agreements, there is some evidence to suggest that they've at least been looking to broaden it up and open it up a little bit. So Russia's first deputy prime minister, Denis Manturov, announced on Tuesday, and this was back in November of last year, that India and Russia are in discussion to prepare Indian workers with skills through Russian vocational training programs to facilitate their future employment in Russian companies. And that was, last year, I think Russia already has 32,000 foreign students in Russian universities. But again, it's quite funny because you hear the kind of numbers that people are really worried about in Russia of foreign migrants coming into the country. And it's just like a drop in the bucket compared to the West, compared to us, because it's like they're panicking over the fact there's already 4,000 visa applications for Indian workers coming into St. Petersburg. They're like, that's way too many.
Numbers that we could only dream of. Yeah.
4,000, that's about at least 100 times less than what Richard Tice would promise us as a reduction of numbers coming into this country. So it is funny to see the perspective change there. Russia has already also, some companies in Russia, including with this one, Ozon, have started to turn to South Asian workers as labour shortages in particular areas of the economy open up. So Ozon's a big online retail place, and they've been turning to workers from India. In this, they include a little clip of a video that you can go to on YouTube of an advert where a man is speaking Hindi and offering all of these different benefits to the people coming in. They'll get housing, they'll get health insurance, they'll get work attire, food, and they'll get Russian language lessons, all free of charge. I think one of the big differences with this, though, is that they would just be coming in to do the work. There's no big promise of citizenship or visa or passports being given them to them so that they can become Russian. It's just like, no, we just want your labour.
That's how the rest of the world does it, really. But I think hearing an Indian speak Russian would be the biggest non sequitur I would have ever heard.
It would maybe blow my mind a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I would deal with that. And of course, big surprise, you're not going to guess this one. Russian big business definitely wants it.
Ah.
Yep.
Yes.
They really want this. Andrei Komarov, a board member of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, proposed training foreign workers specifically for the Russian job market at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Education Minister Sergei Kavstov also voiced support for the proposal. He claimed that countries across the former Soviet Union, as well as in Africa and Latin America, that's definitely what Russia needs, more Africans, had expressed strong interest in Russia's vocational educational system and its professionalism federal project. Well, yeah, of course people from incredibly poor countries are going to want to come over and take jobs from your own people. Of course, that's what's going to happen. Earlier this year, the Samolyot construction firm launched a pilot program to employ Indian nationals on Moscow building sites. Company executives praised Indian workers as reliable and more affordable than Central Asian workers. Central Asian, I would assume, meaning big non-Russian parts of Russia. Noting that their employment contracts prevented them from switching jobs. So they're literally just going, we can exploit these guys so much better. Please, daddy government, let us take in more cheap labour, please. Don't you love big business, folks?
Don't do it, Poot. Don't do it.
I've seen what you've done for the Arabs, and I want you to do it for me.
The same for everywhere. But the big thing with this one, the 1 million figure, was coming from a man called Andrei Besedin, head of the Ural Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Obviously, this is a regional chamber.
Yeah, the Ural Mountains, so that's out in, sticks a little bit.
Yes, this is not,
I think,
a federal section of the government. This is a regional chamber of commerce. He made an assertion on Wednesday saying the arrival of Indian workers would assuage the country's deepening labour shortage, particularly in the Sverdlovsk region. But the Labour Ministry has said that the recruitment of workers from India is regulated by quotas and are set a year in advance based on regions and employers' needs. Each specialist from visa countries invited within the quota obtains a work visa and work permit, and the company, before employing a visa worker, obtains permission from the Interior Ministry to hire such employees. So they need to get government permission to do it in the first place. Russia's total quota for foreign workers in 2025 is 234,900, with 71,817 spots for Indian citizens, which is less than the number of H-1B visas that were issued last year in America, for instance. So, but they again point out in this article, Russian businesses are experimenting with it. They mention the construction pilot program. They mention the other companies that I've mentioned, but they say while executives cited advantages, including lower wage expectations and limited job mobility compared to Central Asian labourers, they also encountered early setbacks, saying the results haven't been particularly successful, blaming the language barrier and cultural differences. So Russia is in very much the same place as we are in terms of demographic crisis. If they are below replacement rates, not necessarily that somebody like Josh or I would agree that you need an enormous population, especially with automation coming along the way. But for the time being, the worry is, while they're not doing it right now, will Russia decide to pull the trigger on mass immigration to fill labour shortages for the sake of cheap labour for big business, the same way that we've experienced over here in England, the US, and the rest of the West. So while the statement that they're bringing in 1 million Indians isn't true right now, I'll be interested to see how it develops, because the problems in place for the conditions to invite all of them in are definitely still there, especially with the war still going on. And I can only hope, as I have done this entire time, that peace talks can be successful and the conflict can be brought to an end and the killing can stop and we can all, and people can go back to their lives.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.